There's a specific kind of person who feels more at ease around animals than they do around most humans. Not because they're broken. Not because something went wrong, but here's what nobody talks about. The psychology underneath that preference is one of the most fascinating. In most misread, patterns researchers have documented in the last 20 years. You know the feeling? You walk into a room full of people, and something in you quietly braces. You calculate. You monitor. You wonder what's expected, what's being judged, what you're supposed to say next. Then you come home, and something with 4 legs doesn't care what you said at that meeting, doesn't remember what you wore last Tuesday, doesn't have an agenda you haven't figured out yet, and for the first time all day, you exhale. The world looks at that and calls it antisocial, avoidant, a little sad. Maybe, but here's what science actually calls it. Picture the specific texture of it. You're not someone who hates people. That's not it. You can do people. You can show up, perform, engage, even enjoy it sometimes. But it costs something. Every interaction has a kind of invisible tax reading tone. Managing impressions, translating what someone means versus what they said. You do it automatically. You've always done it. You just never chose to. With an animal, there's no translation layer. What you see is what's actually happening. Hunger, comfort, fear, joy, it's all right there on the surface. Unedited, with no subtext to decode. That's not a small thing. For a certain kind of nervous system, that's everything, and here's where it gets fascinating. Psychologists who study human-animal bonding, a field that has grown significantly since the 1980s, describe something called the biophilia hypothesis. Originally proposed by biologist E.O. Wilson, the idea is that humans have an innate, evolutionarily encoded affiliation with other living things, not just pets, living systems, other creatures, the natural world. But what researchers found when they looked more closely is that this pull toward animals isn't uniform across all people. It's significantly stronger in individuals whose early social environments were unpredictable, emotionally inconsistent, or high-stakes. In other words, people who learned early that other humans were complicated. And this is the part that usually makes people go quiet for a second. It's not that something went wrong with these people. It's that something went right in a specific, adaptive direction. When a child grows up in an environment where human connection is warm but unpredictable, a parent who is loving but volatile, a household where affection had conditions attached, a social world that rewarded performance over authenticity, the nervous system learns a very logical lesson. Humans are higher risk. Animals are not. And so the attachment system, which is looking for somewhere safe to land, finds it. Not because the person is giving up on humans, because their brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Seek connection where connection feels survivable. Psychologists call this a compensation dynamic in attachment theory. It's not pathology. It's intelligence. The organism finding what it needs through an available pathway. But there's something underneath this that the research points to, and it changes how the whole thing lands. That's coming. If this is landing somewhere more specific than you expected, that's what this channel is built for. Subscribing means the next one finds you too. What's fascinating is what these people tend to look like. From the outside versus the inside. From the outside, they seem self-sufficient, maybe a little distant. The person who seems more comfortable in the corner with the host's dog than in the center of the party. The one whose Instagram is 90% animals and 10% everything else. From the inside, they're often among the most perceptive readers of emotion in any room. Because they learned to read nonverbal cues early. They had to. When words weren't reliable, they became experts in tone, in posture, in the small physical signals that told them what was actually happening versus what was being said. Animals just gave them a place to use that skill without the cost. Here's what most people miss about this. The preference for animals isn't a retreat from connection. It's a very specific standard for it. These are people who feel things deeply and have learned, sometimes painfully, that not every environment is safe for that depth. Animals don't punish emotional honesty. They don't recoil from need. They don't get uncomfortable when you're sad and stay sad for longer than seems socially acceptable. A dog doesn't check whether your grief is proportional, and for someone who has spent years managing how much they feel in front of others, that is not a small thing. That is, in a very real sense, the only place the full version of them gets to exist. They're often the first person someone calls in a crisis, because they're calm, because they listen without immediately trying to fix, because somewhere in their history they learned how to sit with discomfort without flinching. What they don't always have is someone who does that for them. And this is where it gets a little complicated in a good way. Here's the part that sounds counterintuitive, but is completely true. The people most drawn to animals over humans are often the people with the most capacity for human connection, not the least. The preference isn't evidence of an inability to connect. It's evidence of an unwillingness to connect badly. They have felt what real attunement feels like in the uncomplicated mirror of an animal who responds to exactly who you are, not who you're performing, and they carry that as a standard. Most humans don't meet it. Not because humans are bad, because humans are complicated, defended, distracted, performing their own management of their own interior worlds. The person who prefers animals isn't asking for less. They're asking for more. They just stopped expecting to find it where they were told to look. And if that paradox landed somewhere real, stay with it. Because what's coming is the part that takes everything we've just covered and reframes the whole thing. It's worth naming something honestly here. Sometimes, preference is also a wall. A place where the depth that belongs in human relationships gets quietly rerouted. Because human relationships carry risks that haven't felt worth taking in a long time. That's not weakness. But it's worth knowing the difference between a preference and a protection. Both can look identical from the outside. Only one of them is a choice. And if any of this feels bigger than a video can hold, that's a real signal worth listening to. Talking to someone who actually knows this territory is never the wrong move. Here's what's actually true about these people. They were taught, somewhere along the way, that being fully themselves in front of another person carried risk. So they became extraordinarily good at reading rooms, managing impressions, and surviving the complexity of human dynamics while keeping the unedited version of themselves for the one relationship that never asked them to perform. That's not a deficit. That's a kind of loyalty to their own interior life that most people never develop. They know what it feels like to be. It's truly seen, not evaluated, not managed, not received through someone else's filters, just seen. They know because they've felt it. It just happened to come first from something that didn't speak, and they've been quietly holding that as a standard ever since. There's a word for people who refuse to settle for connection that costs them themselves. It's not antisocial, it's just honest.